the babies are gone. And I put my hands around my wife's neck and did that 17.
On the morning of August 13th, 2018, a woman named Shanann Watts should have been starting another ordinary day. She was pregnant. She had 2 little girls waiting for her. She had plans, messages to answer, a life to keep moving forward. But that morning, something was wrong. She did not show up where she was supposed to be. She did not answer the calls. She did not come home. And by the time police started asking questions, the man pleading for her return was the same man who had already murdered the entire family.
I just want them back. I just want them to come back. And if they're not safe right now, that's what's tearing me apart. Because if they are safe, they're coming back. But if they're not, this has got to stop. Like, somebody has to come forward.
Did you guys get into an argument before she left?
It wasn't like an argument. We had an emotional conversation, but I'll leave it at that. But I want everybody to just come home. Right, wherever they're at, come home.
This is not just a story about murder. It is a story about performance, about control, about the kind of man who smiles on camera while his life is rotting from the inside. Before she became known to the world as the victim in one of America's most shocking family murder cases, Shanann Watts was a woman who had spent years fighting to build the life she wanted. Born Shanann Catherine Razusek on January 10, 1984, in Aberdeen, North Carolina, she grew up in a working-class family that valued perseverance and hard work. Friends and relatives would later describe her as ambitious, outgoing, and fiercely independent. She was the kind of person who set goals for herself and refused to let obstacles stand in the way. After graduating from Pinecrest High School, Shanann entered adulthood determined to establish herself professionally. Unlike many people whose paths are clearly defined from an early age, Shanann's journey was marked by constant effort and reinvention. She took on various jobs while pursuing opportunities that would allow her to become financially independent. But life wasn't always easy. In her 20s, Shanann faced significant health challenges, including a diagnosis of lupus, an autoimmune disease that affected many aspects of her life. Rather than allowing it to define her, she became increasingly focused on building a future filled with purpose, family, and security. Those who knew her during these years remembered someone who was always working towards something bigger, someone who believed she could create a better future through determination alone. Shanann built a career in sales and customer relations, industries that suited her outgoing personality and natural ability to connect with people. She was confident, energetic, and comfortable speaking with others, traits that helped her advance professionally. By her mid-20s, she had achieved something many people her age only dreamed about. She purchased her own home in North Carolina, a significant accomplishment that reflected both her ambition and her desire for stability. Then, in 2010, she met Chris Watts. The introduction came through Facebook. Chris, a quiet mechanic from North Carolina, had noticed Shanann online and sent her a friend request. At first, Shanann wasn't interested. According to later accounts, she initially ignored or deleted the request. Chris, however, remained persistent and eventually reached out again. The two couldn't have seemed more different. Shanann was outgoing, confident, and expressive. She enjoyed socializing, sharing her life with friends, and speaking openly about her goals and ambitions. Chris, by contrast, was reserved, soft-spoken, and often described as shy. Friends would later say he seemed content to stay in the background while Shanann naturally took center stage. Yet their differences appeared to complement one another. As they spent more time talking online and eventually meeting in person, a relationship began to develop. Chris was drawn to Shanann's energy and confidence, while Shanann appreciated what she saw as his calm, dependable nature. Before long, they were spending much of their time together, and the relationship became serious. To Shanann, Chris seemed like the kind of man she could build a future with. A few years later, they got married, started a family, and eventually moved to Colorado. They welcomed 2 daughters, Bella and Celeste, with a 3rd child on the way. From the outside, it looked like the beginning of the life Shanann had always worked so hard to create. But beneath the photographs, social media posts, and smiling family videos, cracks were already beginning to form. Cracks that would eventually lead to one of the most devastating family tragedies in modern American history. A house, 2 little girls, another baby on the way. Things seemed perfect, but the truth was that the walls of that home was already holding deadly secrets. While Shanann was pregnant with their 3rd child, a baby boy they planned to name Nico, she had no idea that the man she trusted most was already moving in a very different direction. From the outside, Chris Watts looked like the kind of man people would never suspect. Quiet, friendly, normal. And that was the frightening part, because his family's social media told a different story than the one unfolding behind closed doors. It was a feed full of bright smiles, children's laughter, vacation moments, pregnancy updates, and tiny pieces of family life that made everything look whole. Shanann believed in that image. Or maybe more accurately, she believed in what it could still become. Because real life was beginning to pull them in another direction. Money was tight. The marriage was strained. And Chris was not just drifting away emotionally. He was building another life. The Watts household was becoming a place where 2 stories existed at once. The one the public saw, and the one that would eventually destroy everything. And when a family is living on 2 separate truths, the ending is usually violent. On August 13th, Shanann returned home after a work trip. A friend dropped her off in the early hours of the morning. She should have been safe at home, but by that point, Chris Watts had already made his choice. That morning, Shanann missed a doctor's appointment. Her friend and neighbor, Nico Atkinson, grew worried. She went to the house. She found Shanann's car there, her phone inside, but Shanann was gone. No sign she had packed. No sign she had left willingly. And Chris Watts did not react like a husband desperate to find his missing family. He reacted like a man who needed time. That is what makes cases like this so disturbing. It is not only the violence. It is the calm that comes before it. The way the lie has already been rehearsed. The way the killer knows the first hour matters most. When police began looking closer, they found an empty home where a family was supposed to be. And then the story started collapsing. Chris Watts told police that Shanann had taken the girls somewhere. Then he said he didn't know where. Then he said maybe she had gone to a friend's house. Then he acted confused, then worried, then crushed. But his behavior never matched his words. His answers were thin. His timing was off. And the people around him could feel it immediately. That unsettling detail becomes clearer with every interview clip from that period. Not because Chris looked evil, but because he looked practiced. The kind of performance you give when you know you need to buy time. Meanwhile, investigators were already building a timeline. Phone records, text messages, doorbell footage, worksite logs, statements from friends. A widening gap between what Chris said and what the facts would eventually prove. And then, the biggest question arrived. Where were Shanann, Bella, and Celeste? Chris worked in a remote oil site, and that detail would become one of the most horrifying parts of the case. Because investigators eventually traced the family to the remote oil site. There, on company's property, they found Shanann buried in a shallow grave. And nearby, they found Bella and Celeste in oil tanks. 2 little girls, 4 and 3 years old, dead at the hands of their father. And Shanann was still carrying his baby boy. The cruelty of this case is difficult to overstate. This was not rage in the moment. This was not some sudden break from reality. This was a father disposing of his family as if he were trying to erase the evidence of his own life. The search for a missing family had become a murder investigation, and the suspect was standing right in the middle of it. As the investigation widened, Chris Watts' double life began to surface. He was having an affair with his co-worker. Her name was Nico Kessinger. And suddenly the case made a different kind of sense. Not because an affair explains murder. It does not. But because it exposes motive, deception, and the internal collapse of a man who wanted one life without the cost of the other. Chris wanted to walk away clean. He wanted the fantasy of a fresh start. But the truth is, every lie he told made the next lie harder to keep up. And Shanann was not clueless. She had sensed the distance. She had sensed something off and was trying to understand what had changed. That is one of the cruelest parts of this story. The wife was noticing the cracks while the husband was already planning how to destroy the entire structure. This is where Chris Watts stops being a suspicious husband and becomes something much darker. Because once detectives had pressed him hard enough, the entire performance began to collapse. At first, he keeps insisting he does not know what happened. Then the pressure rises and the story shifts again. After 48 hours, he finally started to confess. Not with remorse. Not with the kind of emotional breakdown people imagine when they hear the word confession. He confesses the way some people surrender in war. Because the battle is over and they lost. He says the girls are gone. He says Shanann is gone. He says things that do not sound like the truth so much as an attempt to make truth sound less terrible. And then comes the line that chills everyone who hears it. He says it felt like something was implanted in his mind. That was not an explanation. That was a surrender to evil without taking responsibility for it. But Chris Watts was not out of control. He made that choice. He chose to cheat, chose to lie, chose to plan the murder of his family and to cover it up. In the end, the truth was more brutal than the lie. Chris Watts had strangled Shanann. Then he had smothered his daughters, Bella and Celeste. And after that, he had tried to hide what he had done by moving bodies, planting stories, and pretending to be a worried father. It is hard to understand how a person can cross that line. But this case was never about one single moment of madness. It was about a man who wanted control more than family, image more than honesty, freedom more than responsibility. That is the pattern. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Because Chris did not wake up one day and become a murderer. He had been becoming one for a long time. In the aftermath, people began going back through Shanann's messages and conversations, looking for the things she had been trying to say all along. She was not silent. She had noticed the distance. She had sensed the affair. She had tried to hold her marriage together. She had tried to protect her children. And like so many victims of domestic violence, she was describing danger before anyone realized how real it was. That is one of the most painful parts of this case. Because Shanann was not simply a victim of violence. She was a woman slowly understanding that the life she thought she had was not the life she was actually living. That gap between appearance and reality is where these crimes often grow. Not in one loud explosion, but in quiet, repeated denial. By November 2018, the evidence against Chris Watts had become overwhelming. Investigators had recovered Shanann's body from a shallow grave at an oil site where Chris worked. Bella and Celeste had been found inside separate crude oil tanks. Phone records, surveillance footage, forensic evidence, and Chris's own statements had destroyed any realistic path to a defense. On November 6, 2018, in a courtroom in Colorado, Chris Watts pleaded guilty to all charges against him. One by one, the judge read the counts aloud. The murders of his pregnant wife, Shanann Watts. The murders of 4-year-old Bella and 3-year-old Celeste. The unlawful termination of Shanann's pregnancy, ending the life of their unborn son, Nico, and multiple counts of tampering with the bodies after the killings. As each charge was read, Chris responded with the same word: guilty. The plea agreement spared him from a possible death penalty prosecution. Prosecutors agreed to remove that option after consulting with Shanann's family, who said they did not want another death resulting from the case. But for Shanann's family, the guilty plea brought little comfort. Nothing could return their daughter. Nothing could bring back Bella, Celeste, or Nico. On November 19, 2018, Chris Watts returned to court for sentencing. Throughout much of the hearing, he sat with his head lowered, rarely looking toward the families gathered in the courtroom. One after another, Shanann's loved ones stood before the court and spoke directly to the man who had once been part of their family. Her father, Frank Rzusek, struggled through tears as he described the betrayal. He told Chris that he had trusted him to protect his daughter and granddaughters, not kill them. He called him a heartless monster and said he had treated their bodies like trash. The courtroom fell silent as family members described birthdays that would never be celebrated, milestones that would never be reached, and futures that had been stolen forever. Chris Watts offered no public explanation, no meaningful answer to the question that haunted everyone in the room. Before the sentencing, Judge Marcelo Kopkow described the murders as among the most inhumane and vicious crimes he had encountered in his career. Then came the sentence: 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole for the murders of Shanann, Bella, and Celeste. 2 additional life sentences for the murders of Bella and Celeste as children under his care. An additional 48 years for the unlawful termination of Shanann's pregnancy, and 36 more years for tampering with the bodies. The punishment ensured one thing: Chris Watts would never again live as a free man. The case that had begun with a husband pleading for the safe return of his missing family ended with a confession, multiple life sentences, and a crime that would become one of the most infamous family annihilation cases in modern American history. The sentencing ended the legal case, but it did not end the questions. How could a father murder his daughters? How could a husband bury the woman carrying his unborn son? And how could someone who appeared so ordinary conceal something so monstrous? Those questions remain at the center of the Watts case. But for Shanann's family, the focus was never Chris Watts. It was the 4 lives that had been cut short. Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and Nico should still be here. While justice was ultimately served, their absence is a reminder of just how devastating family violence can be. If you found this documentary meaningful, consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. It helps us continue telling stories that deserve to be remembered. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.